Okay, the floor is yours. Take it away.
All right. So here we are, wherever we are. And uh, I hope everybody is able to breathe. Uh, uh, it's interesting in that just at the last virtual conference I was on uh, had been originally scheduled to be held in the forest near Santa Cruz. And so even if we had not had the pandemic, we probably would not have been able to have our real conference. And of course, here today, uh, if Pagan Pride was actually supposed to be out on the street or in the park, uh, people would probably be thinking twice about wanting to spend a whole afternoon out there. So in the meantime, we are all here in our houses where hopefully the air is breathable. Being able to breathe is one of the basic rights of living beings. And we're very concerned with rights these days. I volunteered to talk about Lady Liberty. I have a manuscript which I've been working on for a couple of years called Carrying a Torch for Liberty. And I was supposed to have finished it last year, but the situation keeps evolving and changing. And at this point, probably won't be out till next year. But unfortunately, we are still going to be having a lot of work to do, no matter what happens in the election. I'm sure we all have our hopes. So the question is, who is Lady Liberty? What is Lady Liberty? And what role can and should she play in our lives as pagans and in the work that we are, most of us, I suspect, are doing to try to help support and heal the country. This country was founded in the 18th century, and that was a period where the tradition of doing mythological representations of things was the favorite form of public decorative art. So you had allegorical figures for absolutely everything. And Liberty was the Liberty as a goddess figure actually predates the Statue of Liberty by a century, and well, almost. And she was appearing in the iconography of the revolution very early on, and she would appear in political illustrations. She would appear as a classically draped figure, often wearing the freedman's cap, red cap, and carrying this rod, because liberty as libertas. The other thing you have to remember is all these people had classical educations. And so they knew all about libertas as a goddess. And the fact that when someone in Rome freed his slave, they'd go down to the temple of the goddess of liberty, and there was a little ceremony, and he got this special cap to mark his new status, and he got a kind of a ceremonial accolade with a staff, and then he was and a certificate, and then he was free. So she was a familiar goddess already, and so she appeared in pictures with Washington. There is a very interesting painting called Liberty Enlightening, Liberty Teaching Wisdom, I think it's called. Anyway, it shows her sitting and she's surrounded by people, including Native Americans and Africans. And so the idea is that she is teaching people how to be free. She appeared on a number of variations on early coinage in the New Republic. And she appeared in advertisements and decorations on wagons and, wherever. So she had this pictorial history that was already well established. I don't know how much the French knew about this, but the French had been very they had been inspired by the American Revolution, and that led to the French Revolution. And by the mid-19th century, when the Civil War was over, the whole idea of abolition was there was still a lot of slavery here and there, and the French had an abolitionary society, and they wanted to congratulate the United States, i.e. the Union, for having won the war and freed the slaves. And so they got this idea of doing a statue, which I believe the inner framework was designed by the same guy who did the Eiffel Tower, Monsieur Eiffel. So they came up with the image of the lady, and we'll have a few readings about how they thought about that when we get to the ritual. So the iconography in the Statue of Liberty, she's holding a book that has the date of the Declaration of Independence. She's crowned with basically rays of light, which there's 7 of them. They may represent the 7 continents. She has her torch, which gives light. And under her feet, which often is not noted unless you happen to actually see a good representation of the entire statue, there are broken chains. So one of the things that her official title by the sculptor is Liberty Enlightening the World. And she's placed facing east. She's placed standing there and holding up her torch, and its rays are supposed to go across the Atlantic and continue to enlighten Europe to follow the sterling example of the United States. Okay, one of the things that a lot of the recent discussions online and in the news and everywhere else, the New York Times Magazine, the Washington Post, there's a lot of discussion about the fact that if you look closely at our sterling example, it wasn't all that sterling. And yes, we proclaimed that all men are created equal, but people of other races didn't quite qualify, much less women. And the 19th century, the whole abolition movement, the feminist, or the suffrage, women's suffrage movement was started by women who had tried to join the abolitionist movement and not been accepted as delegates. And so I was just talking about the suffragists yesterday at another virtual conference. And so the idea of women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights, but that expands to the idea that everybody's rights are human rights. And so that expands to whatever your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your nationality. Eventually, the ideal made it all the way through the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. So what liberty was created to proclaim was that we had an ideal. It does not, unfortunately, proclaim that we ourselves even have successfully and completely realized this ideal. And at the moment, if we look around at what's going on, uh, our progress as a country has been 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or maybe 2 steps back sometimes. And we're currently going through a period when certain people, unfortunately, many of them in the government, are trying to move us back. What we cannot afford to do is throw out the baby with the bathwater. We have to recognize that the founders, even though half of them were slave owners, dared to reach for something. It was beyond their total grasp. But in the first years, everybody was so blown away by the fact that they were trying to transcend classism. The idea that the class you're born to determines your fate. You know, we still had the race you're born to determines your fate and your rights, but not the class. And when de Tocqueville, the Frenchman, toured the United States in 1830, he just kept going, oh, look, anybody, no matter what their birth, they can go and become things. So this is the essence of the ideal. And just as in Rome, when they burned incense to the emperor, it wasn't to the mortal man, it was to his higher self, and in hopes that his higher self would be inspired to be a good governor. I haven't quite been able to bring myself to try this on a picture of Trump, but the principle actually does apply. Okay, so Liberty, who is supposed to enlighten the world. At the moment, I think she needs to turn around and enlighten us first. And that is what we're going to be doing very shortly in the ritual part of this. But she's an obvious goddess image. Well, to us, she is anyway. And as such, and because she continues to be so visible and so well known and so popular, and when the statue was renovated at the time of her centenary in, I think it was 1966, 66, somewhere around in there, 63, 66. The city of New York realized that they had something going there, and suddenly, to a greater extent than before, you had statues, you had postcards, you had basically what you had was ritual gear, and all the kinds of things that medieval pilgrims and pilgrims in the classical world would pick up, the souvenirs that they would pick up when they went to a pilgrimage to a sacred place. And so it became very easy to collect a bunch of stuff and bring it home and set up a Liberty altar. Now, we all know how memes work, and it's, I think, related to the Dion Fortune's theories on thought forms. If enough people are visualizing something in the same way, the next person who tries to get in touch with that image will see it that way. And so if the more of us work with Lady Liberty, especially as portrayed in her statue, as a enlightener of our own country, as well as the rest of the world, the more reality that image will have, the more power it will have. And the meditation we're going to do is one that that anybody can pick up and continue and do whenever we seem to have need. Okay, right, okay. Well, that is the basic introductory part. So get comfortable. You're going to be sitting for a bit. You probably were sitting for a bit, but a nice balanced position where you can relax. And I'm going to, there's no point in trying to cast a physical circle because we are in cyberspace. So I want to invoke those who weave the fates of humankind to create us a sphere in CyberGuard. So, sacred sisters, now I summon to spin a space in CyberGuard, within, without a doubt, keep safe this sphere and all who are here. So when the sculptor wrote about his plans for the statue, he said, "Make the statue a woman because the symbol for liberty has always been a woman. Women often represent great ideas. The torch is a symbol of freedom. It lights the way for people who love liberty. The 7 rays of her crown will enlighten the 7 seas and the 7 continents. Use my mother Charlotte as a model for her face. Mother's face shows strength and suffering. Model the statue's arms after my fiancé's beautiful arms. Give her clothes from ancient Greece, the birthplace of democracy. Make her walk forward to show her progress toward freedom. The date of American independence, July 4th, 1776, will be on the tablet. The broken chains at her feet will show her escaping bondage. Make her really huge. Liberty is a big idea." We affirm our freedom by reading the First Amendment, introduced by the words, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." That's one that has been rather timely lately. Now, the French sent the statue. They said, "You need to put her on a pedestal and you get to build that." So the city of New York started trying to raise money. And as part of that fundraising effort, Emma Lazarus wrote a poem, which eventually was actually inscribed on the pedestal. And you're probably all familiar with it. It goes, "Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp," cries she, with silent lips. "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." So we have what the sculptor thought he was creating, and we have what an American woman saw that he was in fact creating. And so she stands. And so she has welcomed a large proportion of ancestors of people in the United States today. And the fact that she is a goddess is shown by stories such as this one about the 3 young Greek men who were coming to America. And they pull into New York Harbor and they see the statue and they look at her, and they're Greek. And they say, "Oh, that's the goddess of America. We should give her an offering. But we don't have anything. What can we give her?" And one of them said, "We'll shave off our mustaches," those bushy Balkan mustaches. So they shaved off their mustaches, and eventually they went and they scattered the mustaches at her feet. And the daughter of one of them who told this story said that after that, her father never again grew his mustache. But the fact of that recognition, I find very validating as we pick that idea up and say, there's a lot of energy in this image. So many people have seen her as a goddess. So many people have found in her hope that we can pick this up, and with our pagan spiritual technology, we can make use of this. So we're going to start with a litany, and the response is, and the lady said, let there be light. And you can perhaps mute yourselves, but I don't think you need to, because we all know what we're saying. For hope and courage. And the lady says, let there be light. In the darkness of ignorance, we seek for understanding. And the lady says, let there be light. In the darkness of danger, we seek deliverance. And the lady says, let there be light. When humans in their darkness fear to see words written, then the lady says, let there be light. When humans in their darkness fear to hear truth spoken, then the lady says, let there be light. When humans in their darkness fear to find themselves mistaken, then the lady says, let there be light. When humans in their fear forbid the livelihood of others, then the lady says, let there be light. When humans in their fear forbid the self-defense of others, then the lady says, let there be light. When humans in their fear forbid the love of others, then the lady says, let there be light. When humans in their fear forbid the faith of others, then the lady says, let there be light. When fear of the forbidden denies all other definitions, then the lady says, let there be light. When fear of the forbidden denies all right to difference, then the lady says, let there be light. When fear of the forbidden denies all others freedom, then the lady says, let there be light. Though the fearful forbid it, we struggle still for liberty. And the Lady of Liberty lifts her torch above the shadows and says, let there be light. We have praised the Lady. Let us use the power of our own minds to transform her from an image to a reality. So get comfortable and close your eyes. Breathe in and out. In and out. In and out. And now see yourself in a mist, cool, moist, flowing around you. And feel beneath you the deck of a ship moving. And as you stand there swaying, the mist begins to thin. And you see before you the lady herself, immense, verdigris copper, her torch with a light. And you come to land, but still you see Lady And now, as you look upon her, her form begins to change. The torch glows ever more brightly until the little light within it becomes a roaring flame that blazes. And now that light is beginning to spread down the shaft of the torch, spreading to her hand, and the hand becomes flesh, the arm, all down, spreading to the shoulder. And now the rays of the crown have turned gold, and they are blazing with light as well. And that light shines forth, shines through her hair and her face, shining all the way down until her robe is blazing white, her skin brilliant. And she stirs. She moves. The light from her crown and her torch illuminate the land for miles around her. Where that light strikes, you see clearly. In New York, you see hospitals. You see where people are striving to preserve those with COVID-19. But you also see the slums where people are crammed together, making them more vulnerable to COVID-19. The light blazes more brightly, and now she stirs and she turns. She steps off of her pedestal, one step bringing her to solid land, and she begins to move across this country, down the Atlantic seaboard, shining her light into the great cities, along the southern part of the country, across the Southwest, up the coast, and around every part of the country she passes, and each place where she stops, her light blazes out. In the east, where it's dark, a police car is chasing another car down the road. The driver pulls over. He's black, sitting very, very still as the police approach. They bristle with hostility. Their hands are on the hilts of their guns. But the light shines into the car so brightly that they see he has no weapon. They see the goodness in his face. And they say, "Sir, may we see your license?" And he takes out the license. And they check it and they say, "Do you know you have a tail light out?" And he says, "Thank you." And they give him a fix-it ticket. And he drives away. And her light flares further in a sanctuary city. And the ICE van cruises the streets, sees a Latina woman, seizes her. And another man says, "No, that's my neighbor. She's been living there for 30 years. She's an American." And the light shines, and they see that, and they let her go. And the light flares further. There's a young man with a jacket with a swastika on it and a spray paint can approaching a synagogue. And the light illuminates him and everything around him. And he sees the beauty in the building. And he remembers, oh, wait a minute. Jesus was a Jew. And he turns away. The light continues to spread. There's a woman with matches and a can of gasoline approaching a Planned Parenthood clinic. And she gets there and she sees the sign in the window listing the things that it does. And suddenly in that bright light, she remembers how her sister was cured of an STD. And she thinks about the fact that her own health insurance isn't very good, and she might need help one of these days. And she thinks, maybe we need this place. And she puts the matches in her pocket, and she turns away and goes home. The light shines everywhere. It shines on someone who's on the internet so brightly they can hardly see the screen, but they look at it and go, you know, what I'm reading here really doesn't make sense. Maybe I should do some fact checking. And it shines that light through the veils of smoke that blanket the West Coast. And people who are looking out their windows at orange light begin to think maybe there's something in this idea of global warming after all. Maybe I'd better look that up. All around the country, her light flares, perhaps to other countries as well. And then she returns to her pedestal. And the light begins to fade or withdraw until it only remains in that bright bulb that is burning in the torch. And now it is night on Liberty Island, and she stands illuminated, glowing green with her torch. But we know that at any time, when we close our eyes and see her with our hearts, that light will enliven her, and she will stride forth once more to enlighten the land that is her home. And now that image too fades, and the mists swirl around you again. And you feel your bodies, you feel the chairs beneath you, and you breathe in and out again, and move your shoulders and your fingers and toes, and sigh and stretch and open your eyes and return. Ignore that telephone. I'm glad it waited.
Call from Dynamic.
Excuse me. So we have a final prayer for her. O Lady Liberty, Mother of Exiles, we call upon you as an aspect of the Great Mother to send forth your light to pierce the darkness of ignorance and oppression until liberty enlightens the world. Dear Goddess, with body of copper and soul of fire, Lady of our homeland, reach out and renew the promise of religious freedom and other freedoms on which this nation was founded. Help your children to understand that there are many ways of worshiping, many ways of believing. Flood them with the awareness that differences are desirable. And guarded by you, teach them equality of esteem so they will learn tolerance of those they do not understand. We ask you now to join with the goddesses from all the lands and accept our honor and our love. Okay, and I'm going to take us out of sacred space in a minute. The Lady lives and will endure for as long as we honor her. Though we say farewell to her now, when darkness threatens, if we call upon her, she will lift her torch to bring light and uphold the liberties which are the foundations of this land. Sacred sisters, whom we summoned to keep us safe in cyber guard, as we return to earthly focus, unwind the web that held this sphere. Okay, and I was kind of caught up in the flow and didn't stop to have deal with questions earlier. So if you can read them for me or do manage things however they need to be, I will try to answer them.
Yeah, I don't see any questions currently, but I'll go ahead and let the participants know that if they've got questions, they can go ahead and unmute themselves one at a time, if you would please.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I can even see this. Thank you. I am assuming that everybody else can probably see these as well.
Yes, everyone can see the chat.
Yeah.
And so the comment.
And one of
from
the things
Shannon,
that when you look at the fact that she's the first thing you see if you're taking a boat from the Atlantic Ocean to Ellis Island, she was clearly the one welcoming the immigrants. And so you really cannot address her as a goddess without thinking about the whole issue of immigration, not only from Europe, i.e. people who look white and are obviously good people, to the southern border, to the West Coast, and to people who don't look so Caucasian. But the history of the United States is the history of immigration, whether voluntary or, as in the case of the African slaves, involuntary. But some of the identitarians, and that actually is a term, that the white nationalist types keep talking about this Anglo-Saxon tradition. And there are a couple of problems with that. One is that the Great Migration from the British Isles actually was 4 separate migrations from different parts of the British Isles, which were so different in culture that they might as well have been separate ethnic groups. So there was never one single Anglo-Saxon tradition to start with. And ever since then, every group, every additional group, starting with the Africans who have moved into this country, have added their own elements to the culture. And so you cannot be American. I mean, can you be American if you don't like pizza? uh, or peanuts. Uh, you know, all so many of the things that are part of our American identity are things that have been brought in by one group or another. You know, not to mention the Native American contribution, starting with place names and how to plant corn and beans, uh, were necessary to the survival of the early colonists. And we finally are beginning to make progress, more progress in dealing with Native American issues. Uh, I live in Berkeley, you know, in the hotbed of liberalism. We're very proud of our liberal credentials, but only now have has organized action being spearheaded by local Native Americans. Yes, there really are some here, to save some of the shell mounds and some of the places where there was Native American habitation and burials. And they're going to rename Kroeber Hall, which is the anthropology department at Cal. And Kroeber was the great scholar for Native Americans, but it was a kind of a rather paternalistic scholarship. So we have to honor him on the one hand for having preserved as much information as he did, and criticize him for not paying more attention to the rights and survival of the people whose cultures he was trying to study and preserve as history. So the Native Americans at the University of California got together, and you know, so old wrongs are, if not being righted, being recognized. And these are all Lady Liberty as both the personification of, you can come to America and become whatever your energy and native gifts will enable you to be. And the fact that she is the one who welcomes people, and to give them, to guarantee their rights to have an equal playing field in which to exercise their individual gifts and express their energies. So there are, there's a book called Liberty and Freedom, A Visual History of American Image Symbols by David Hackett Fisher. And he points out that the English is the only language that has two words which are often treated as interchangeable but have different origins: liberty and freedom. And liberty, as in Rome with libertas, is a change in an individual's status, in which he gains more rights and opportunities. Freedom has to, the idea of being a free man or a free person, because man in Germanic was humans, is the rights you have because you were born into the tribe. So the inalienable rights really are the freedom rights, the rights that we all should have because we're human beings. And the liberties are what we can achieve, but they go together. And so I think that when Lady Liberty goes around with her torch illuminating things, that she is actually serving us to lead in both. For freedom, we also, however, as an aside, have Columbia, who's on top of the Capitol building, whose other name, her official name, is Freedom. And I'll be talking about all that in the book when I finally get it put together. thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about this today, because this actually is going to help me get back to work on the book. The realization of how important it is that we understand what we're fighting for and what powers there are who can help us. If we help them, they help us. It's a coordinated effort. Yes, you had a comment. It came and it went, so I didn't hear it.
So this is a comment from Megan. The idea of simultaneously holding sources of wisdom with honor and with accountability is definitely part of our work as modern pagans. Do you have
Yep.
a favorite resource for more information about Libertas? Excited for this book.
Yeah, David Hackett Fisher's book, Liberty and Freedom. It's a great humongous thing. It's about this thick with lots and lots of pictures. But if you can find it used, it's affordable. And he also wrote a book called Albion's Seed, which is about that great British migration and all the different ethnic groups and how very different they were culturally. The culture of the New England Puritans versus the Middle Atlantic Cavaliers, the gentry of Virginia, versus the Quakers, and finally the borderers who ended up in Appalachia. Extremely different, but it's the interaction that created the first mixing of cultures that became the United States, and then everybody else, plus the Indian influence and the African influence. They all mixed together. Yeah, anyway, those are two very good books. And there's another book called The Soul of America, and I'm spacing his name. One of those tip of the tongue. Anyway, look up The Soul of America, which is really a kind of a collection of all the really inspiring things that our leaders have said about what America is actually supposed to be about. And I'm very pleased. I bet you that Joe Biden, or at least somebody on his staff, has read that book, because there's some of the wording that is in there that creeps into Biden's speeches, which I always find encouraging.
Just a last question here. What was the name of the Albion book? Albion?
Albion's Seed. SEED. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming to speak with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I would rather have found the opportunity to make a trip up there, because I have some good friends up there. But yeah, see you another year.
Yes, we sure hope to be able to bring you out
next year and almost anywhere with clean air, preferably.
Yes, thank you.
So,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, blessed be everyone. Be safe.
Blessed be indeed. And breathe freely of clean air to you.